Kitco Mining special coverage of the Mining Investment Event of the North is brought to you by EMX Royalty Corp.
Commodity bull market is halfway over, says Peter Grandich, but the second half is going to be as good as the first. Peter Grandich, he's an investor, he's an analyst. You can find his writings at petergrandich.com as well as X. Peter, welcome back to Kitco.
Always a pleasure to speak to Kitco. Number one in this business, no doubt. Say it no matter who else was interviewing me.
Peter, we appreciate it. We also appreciate these good precious metal prices. Gold has hit several all-time highs. Silver is up about a third year to date, I would say. What's driving these gold prices higher right now?
The single biggest thing was obviously from Asia, predominantly China, but tremendous physical demand, unlike anything I've ever seen in the 40 years I've been around this, which overcame the paper market, which tendency to have a tendency to be more bearish than bullish over time. The physical demand is the single biggest, and that is part of, I believe, the belief that a movement away from the dollar, both as a monetary vehicle and also the United States in general on the world stage, and that falls into the role of the BRIC nations. It's something that I've said all along a year or so ago, that within 3 to 5 years, what the BRIC nations will become will equal to what the Industrial Revolution did to trade, and they're going to look for an alternative to the dollar. And for a couple thousand years, gold has been a great alternative to the dollar. And I really believe that's the primary. There are others, but that's the big reason that sent it to where it's gone up until now.
What's happening with mining equities right now, Peter? So we've seen these all-time highs with gold. I checked the GDX today. It's June 4th right now. It's only up 11% year to date. Shouldn't we see some more action out of mining equities?
Well, for me, it's interesting. I've been out of the communication of the mining. I have not been to a conference in over 10 years. It's dramatically changed, especially for the junior resource company. The first thing that's changed is there's just much harder for a junior company to meet that end user. Years ago, when brokers and financial advisors built their book of business around building positions in stocks, they did it because there was a commission. That's gone. That's dinosaurs. So the person or the lead person that would get his group, her clientele, or his clientele involved in these juniors doesn't exist anymore. Now, Mike, those same end users could exist. I think there's actually less of them. But now these same companies have to reach those end users, the eventual buyer, almost on a case-by-case basis. That's an awful big challenge in any industry, let alone this one. The second thing that changed, and this is critical, and a lot of mining people don't want to hear it, crypto is eating junior resources lunch. The amount of interest that came into that market, justifiably or not, versus if it didn't exist, would have found part of its way into this market, is also another negative. And that's why when everybody saw this great increase in physical market and they weren't seeing it corresponding in the mining shares, those two and other reasons combined have made the mining shares, especially the junior end, lag compared to what we think it should have been, given how historically it would have acted otherwise.
Talked to a lot of mining CEOs and junior CEOs. They're hanging their hat on what's going to be happening in Q2. There's going to be a lot of cash in that. So we have been having these all-time highs for that. So when we get to Q2 and then we see how these gold miners have been reacting with $2,300 an ounce gold, that should create more of a spark, and that should create more interest in the community, just given the cash that we're going to see from the seniors.
I think it will for the majors, because they will have that, and a lot of it will be free cash flow. But I don't think it's yet prepared to flow down to the junior end of the market, the pure exploration companies. I would say the bear market, which basically existed for 12 years, has ended, but it's just revolving into a bull market in the mining shares. We are still seeing competition as the biggest negative. Let's not forget that as you and I speak, 7 or 10 of the stocks that make up the S&P 500 is the bulk of the gain of the market. And Mike, this is a key point for people miss. Copper went up 25% in less than 2 months. that would be the equal of the Dow going to 40 to 50,000. Believe me, if the Dow went to 40 or 50,000, you couldn't turn on any news, regular secular news. That's all they would speak about. And it was basically a hush. Metals still have a lot of work to be done in the investment community to recognize how much more metals are needed to achieve what a lot of people in the regular world say they are expecting to happen. And we haven't seen it come down yet to the junior aspect of the market.
One thing I don't understand about the copper story with the gold story is it seems like it's telling two different types of outcomes. Gold is that you're worried what's happening with BRICS. You're worried about more geopolitical dysfunction right now. You're worried about macro. You're worried about inflation. You're going to gold. You see people that are also, they're equally bullish on copper, and they see that because of energy transition. They see that about more investment. Can you be bullish about copper and be bullish at gold at the same time?
Yeah, at this point in time, yes. Might have not been 10 or 20 years ago. The gold is fairly simple, as I said. It's being acquired by people who are concerned about paper currencies in general, and the U.S. both as a government and as a monetary and an economic arm in the world. The copper story is simply, and it fits into some other metals, we've just not looked for enough. We have such more increased demand, whether it's a lighter story now. Let's just say that electric vehicles aren't the darlings that everybody thought just 2 years ago as a slam dunk, but there's definitely a change. And AI, and the fact, Mike, you and I could have had this conference 20 or 30 years ago. We could have spun a globe. I would point my finger and say, we can go mining there. That's not the case anymore. The world has shrunk, at least for safety and economic reasons, where many of these mining companies are going to go look. And that means supply is still going to be restricted, and therefore the supply and demand story for copper, whether or not there's an economic slowdown or not, is far more powerful now than when there used to be ample supply. We'd have a slowdown, everybody goes, oops, sell copper, Dr. Copper, etc. The supply and demand story for base metals and critical metals is so dramatically more bullish now than any other time in my 40-year career.
We're in an election year in the U.S. We've also wrapped up some big elections in India as well as in Mexico. How would you rate Biden's economic policies?
Well, I'll say this while I'm in this lovely country, which was once a second home to me, Canada. I think if we traded our leaders, each side would think they got the short end of the stick. So I think economically is just one of the many issues that Biden has before him. I personally have talked about 2 years ago not seeing a recession to the latter part of this year. And in the last few weeks, tremendous amount of indications now that we're sliding pretty hard. So Biden economics, I think, is going to come like the word transitory came to the Federal Reserve. They won't be saying it anymore because it's failed.
Biden has had some policies that have been favorable towards the miners. So I think of the Inflation Reduction Act and being able to do funding that has happened. And Lithium Americas comes to mind, Piedmont Lithium, also Perpetua as well too. Just the interest in terms of how would you say fortifying a critical mineral sector for the United States?
The world has woken up. One of the things COVID did, at least for Americans, I probably speak for Canadians as well, that globalization was great. It lowered inflation. It kept prices lower. But we recognized that we were dependent on, for most of the daily stuff we need, from someone else other than ourselves, and for the United States, potentially adversaries. Critical minerals is a story that's not going away, Mike. It's going to become more advantageous even here in Canada. Titans of Canada have recognized that too much is being given away, and we're not focusing on what really need to move forward. So critical minerals, no matter whether they're Democrats or Republicans in the United States or whatever party in Canada, are going to be in the forefront and recognize the necessity, if we're going to have anywhere the growth that the don't worry, be happy crowd on Wall Street likes to picture about why stocks should only keep going higher and higher. You're going to need the metals to support that growth. And right now, the mechanisms are not in place to meet this expected demand.
Where are we with BRICS right now and the protection of the U.S. dollar as a reserve currency?
So, Mike, I've been in the camp, one of the small minority in the U.S. that believes that one of the biggest errors that Wall Street has made in the last couple of decades is not recognizing how critical the BRIC nations will come on the world stage. Most of it is still laughed upon. They're not really that important. They're not big countries. I think within 3 to 5 years, and I think this October will go a long way to prove my theory or not, that they will rival how the Industrial Revolution implemented world trade. People don't understand in the United States, these are countries getting together to not only not use American currency, but to disallow and disuse American with trade. That's a net negative for the United States, no matter how they look at it. And as each country moves towards that and joins that union, the more challenging and more impact it's going to have in America in a negative way. I think the BRICS are one of the biggest stories to come, and people that aren't taking geopolitics into thought better start to understand what is happening with the BRIC nations.
Criticisms of BRICS, or how would you say what can hold back the BRICS by critics of that movement, is the fact that you're talking about some pretty autocratic countries. You're talking about countries that have less developed rule of law, places that are really hard to have assets invested in because they have less protection of rule of law.
Mike, I would say that, and with respect to your country here, Canada, that was a good argument 20 or 30 years ago, how America and the United States was compared to that. There's a lot of things I'm watching now, especially in the United States, that I only imagine would happen in a third world country 20 or 30 years ago. And now it's happening right in front of my eyes. So I don't think that's going to play as much of a critical role about people's concern. And I think what will happen also, if I'm correct on what's going to happen here in the fall, I believe they're going to at least paint a picture on how they're going to trade and what possibly means they're going to use, whether it's a replacement currency, an alternative, or simply stay within their own currencies and not involve themselves at all in the dollar. I think people are going to realize how much more formidable the BRICS are going to be on the world stage as we get into 2025 and beyond.
It's June 2024 right now. Top macro trends, top macro events that you're looking forward to or anticipating over the next 12 months?
Well, I'll tell you this much. Compared to the previous 12 months, what's moving front and center in the United States is the political environment. It's probably going to be far more important to people in general than the social and economics. Not only has the middle class been destroyed in America, middle ground has been destroyed. Both parties almost impossible to work with, and now have a splintering within each one where one is moving more left and the other part is moving more right. And politics at the end of the day are going to be the only thing hopeful to solve many of the economic, social problems we have. And I don't think we have the players right now that can do that.
Lastly, Peter, what are some of your top ideas?
Well, I'm here in Quebec. I came mostly because it's where the largest part of my investments are. I was very pleased today to hear the CEO of I Am Gold not only paint a much brighter picture for his company, but what he foresees here in Quebec. It's been one of my favorite places, companies like Northern Superior Resources, Radisson, Amex Exploration. But I have believed, and I've shrunk where I will go in the world. I will only sleep nights in North America. I don't have any comfort anymore to hold investments outside of North America. The social and political risks are too large. And Providence like Quebec and Ontario and states like Nevada and Arizona, to me, that's where I think if I'm going to be involved in mining and exploration, that's where I want to see companies focused on.
You like the province just because of the lineage and because of the community, the rules of law, and just everything that they've been able to do regarding gold here in the past?
Everything support of it, the social issues, everything that you would want to have. And one thing that's always mistaken by people, even when exploration, because they just think it's a couple of guys drilling, infrastructure is so critical when you're exploring, and just tremendous infrastructure in many of the provinces in Canada, but none better in my view than here in Quebec.
Peter Grandich, we're delighted to see you back at these mining conventions.
I was most delighted to be back, and most delighted that it was Kitco that had me do my interview again after almost 11 years.
My name's Michael McRae here at the Mining Investment of the North in Quebec City for Kitco Mining.
Kitco Mining special coverage of the Mining Investment Event of the North is brought to you by EMX Royalty Corp.